Okay, I think we're live. I think we're live. Well, I just want to say hello to all the viewers. Thank you again for tuning in. This is what I consider to be the second rendition of a conversation with the system breakers. So for those who don't know me, my name is Jason Fitch. I'm a director here at the Bates Group. I help lead business development efforts and partnership efforts here at our compliance consulting firm. I have joining with me today Jason Noto. I'm not going to steal your thunder. I'm going to go ahead and allow you to introduce yourself to the group.
Well, hey everyone, my name's Jason Noto. I'm Fintech Payments Counsel at Polsinelli. Happy to be here with you all.
All right, fantastic. So listen, a lawyer that's in the payment space, that is always something that's very intriguing to me. I'd love to kind of get a feel for how you kind of got into this space, where your passion lies. And so everyone kind of understands a little bit before we kind of dive into some of the granular details here, why this is a discussion that, you and I should be having today.
Sure. Well, how did I get into this space? Nobody that I know goes to law school. I certainly didn't go to law school and says, oh, I'm going to go be some payments lawyer. I actually started my career prosecuting and financial crimes, among other things. And then joined from there, I got hooked up with Kim Ford at Fiserv, who is, if nobody knows Kim, she is the best government relations person in the world. And I joined her to do some policy work on the payment side. Payments even then was new to me, and this is a while ago.
Yeah.
So I remember, kind of locking myself in this office and reading books and books and coming out maybe like a month later and saying, okay, I think I get it now. And doing, the coolest thing about payments, especially when you do it at somewhere like I did with Fiserv, is that it touches so many areas of just our world, and it's at the center of everything, until people start doing things for free, I guess. So having the opportunity to kind of apply that knowledge across all these different sectors within just like our world, with payments at the center, kind of like fostered my understanding. And then when we talk about like even like more like emerging markets, got hooked up with someone like a mentor, Jonathan O'Connor, on the gaming side, and he has that vision as to, well, how do we take payments and apply this into these other areas? And really, Jason, my career has just progressed along the way to now I'm with Polsinelli after years of in-house and working with who I think is very big on the visionary side too, my managing partner, John Martini. And that's where I am now, joining you all.
Well, listen, I appreciate that insight. Like you, I find the payment space to be incredibly intriguing, right? More so because of what it does, for the connecting of people across the world, across the globe. So these are really important conversations because, there are a lot of players in this space, right? Whether it's the banks, whether it's fintech entrepreneurs, or these really big fintechs that have had a lot of venture capital behind them, that are making incredible impacts on a global scale. But the reality is, and I think this is a perfect icebreaker for us, is why do these partnerships between these banks and these fintechs sometimes feel so hard? And should they be, right? I have my thoughts on it, but I'm curious, from your legal mind, right? Where are the real challenges that you're seeing when it comes to these partnerships? And why are we seeing headache after headache in the industry when, really good ideas are teaming up with really smart banks, and then, we're finding ourselves in some hot water?
Well, okay, so definitely not your normal icebreaker, like, hey, what's your name and where are you from and what's your favorite food?
No, 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 no. We're gonna jump right into the ocean on this.
But the headaches, Jason, I don't know if it's really the headaches as much as it just takes strategic alignment. And
Yeah.
the strategic alignment really just takes more of a macro view. While in my understanding, or my experience, I guess, but also kind of the ability to drill down on those micro levels
Yeah.
and having someone who kind of sees like the big picture. How do banks work? How do processors work? How do ISOs work? How do program managers work? How do these companies that want to get into the space, these aspiring fintechs that you wouldn't even think are wanting to like deliver these financial goods and services to their customers, what's their place? And then you
Yeah.
have the operators, and most importantly, you have the customers, because that's the demand that everyone's trying to meet. So really, it's just a matter of alignment, communication, strategy on my side when I'm working with this and I'm advising on all these different sides of it, which I
Yeah.
am, and bringing everyone together. It's really a matter of, at the end of the day, getting from point A to point B. And that point E is where are we? And point B is where do we want to be? And more often than not, where we want to be is delivering something to our customers, and delivering it faster and more seamlessly, and of course, more secure.
Hey, listen, Jason, that's great information, right? So listen, I consider myself to be a connector of people, connector of dots, right? I can't tell you how often, I'm speaking with family members and they go, what exactly do you do, right? I don't actually do any kind of regulatory work. So as a compliance professional, I'm not going to write your AML policies and procedures. I have a team of experts, with the organization that I'm with that are far smarter than me. However, what we do is we'll come into these situations, into these partnerships, and we'll kind of identify some of these roadblocks that you really talked about there. And we say, hey, how do we come in and partner with you to be able to figure out how to take your organization from where you are to where you want to go, provide those guardrails, right? Bring in the appropriate partnerships, whether it's legal representation, whether it's our consultants that specialize in licensing or our consultants that specialize in building out successful AML programs, or just doing a gap analysis of the program that you've already built. I think it's something that it's really kind of not underappreciated. I think the word I'm looking for more so is taken for granted, right? Because when these banks and fintechs, they invest into these really, really incredible programs, where they tend to want to skimp on their investment is on this exact part of the discussion. And this is how you get where you want to go. In my mind, is why these partnerships feel so hard is because everybody's looking to say, hey, I have this great idea. How do I scale without laying the foundations? The same way of building a house, right? Once I remember when I got my home built about 10 years ago, my wife and I, we would come to the grounds and it took them forever to lay the foundation. I mean, literally, that was, probably the slowest part of the entire process. But once that foundation was lit or laid, the entire home, it seemed like it came up in like 24 hours, right? And I know it was a little longer than that, but the investment was in the foundation. I think when you think about compliance and you think about how to protect your investment, that's really the foundation to a lot of these partnerships. And whenever you build on something outside of that foundation, that's where I start to see a lot of the challenges within the space.
Well, that's a good take, Jay, and I agree. And so even just based on experience, and I've had like in my experience, I've had this opportunity to work hands-on with whether it be compliance teams, risk teams, program teams, product teams. And when you're in these departments and you're building all this, when you're trying to get them to build and deliver, these things need to be considered upfront strategically. And it really is, it has to be worked into the framework, because I've been in too many situations where I've had to, try to help people on the back end. And the back end sometimes, unfortunately, Jason, is now someone's looking to scale, or now someone's looking for investment, and they've built this fantastic program or platform or product by incredibly smart people, but didn't really think about the legal or the compliance upfront,
Yeah.
licensing, regulatory, whatever. And now you have some very smart people at these VC firms, investment banks, who are like, oh, okay, well, wait a minute. How come, you're doing this, but didn't you get a license or whatever? And then strategically, Jason, even on that front end, it can come down to contracting, right? So it's like, how is your partnership defined, and how are you growing that along the way to enable you to scale and enable you to grow? So everything, legal, compliance, yes, Um, it may not be like the sexiest sometimes, but at the same time, it's necessary because you have to consider it in order to do it right and in order
Yeah.
to grow it the right way as well.
Well, listen, I challenge that word, the sexiest, because one thing that I'm very keen on trying to do is bring sexy back to compliance, right? Not that it ever had it, right? But I want to make sure that, it's become something that's outside of a buzzword. I was having a discussion with somebody who, I truly respect in the industry. And we were kind of talking about the Web3 space. And, I asked him, his take on compliance. And his first response to me was, um, well, and what aspect of it, right? Because compliance is kind of a buzzword. And that actually kind of caught me off guard because I'm like, a buzzword. That's interesting, right? I mean, literally, whether it's an enforcement action, whether it's a cease and desist, whether it's a denial for a bank partnership, compliance is the head of all these conversations that are happening. So why does the industry see it as a buzzword? And my take on it is that as compliance professionals, we stick to the regulatory piece of this, right? And these really smart entrepreneurs are building these really transformative products, and we're not actually talking about what we do, right? I'll tell anybody who's on the live today, and I hope the people who are joining in are curious about this, right? As compliance professionals, we are not looking to check boxes for you, right? We literally want to help protect your investment, give you a bespoke solution to where we can partner with you as you continue to grow. Even in the Web3 space where regulatory, where the regulatory environment is kind of uncertain, right? There's not a bunch of regulation around it. I think everybody's still trying to figure it out. This is the prime opportunity for a thought leader in the industry to say, hey, there are things that we need to understand, right? We understand that transactions happen on the blockchain, smart contracts, et cetera. We understand all of these things, but how do we really pay attention to where the money's coming from? Who's actually spending the money and where it's going, and how do we put guardrails into it? So when we do invite, people from the traditional finance environment into our solutions, that they can say, hey, this makes sense to us because we can tie it into what we traditionally look at, right? So you take new innovation, you take old innovation, you take old technology, you kind of bridge it together. And I think when you are intentional about that, that's how you create really strong partnerships. So yeah, it's just, kind of my thoughts on it. I think compliance is so much bigger than, I have to have an independent review done every year, right? Or, I need to have policies and procedures. I think it's something that you can get really excited about, especially when it's done the right way.
Well, I wish anyone luck in getting excited about independent reviews because it is something that's necessary. And Jason, you mentioned some good stuff, and even before that, right? Even before the compliance, it's really like strategically advising as to, well, what am I getting into? So what is an aspiring fintech really getting into when they start to partner with a bank? Because even if you take like in a banking as a service space, or even as like, and I know we'll be talking about digital assets and cryptocurrency and how that's going to be working its way into, more and more into banks as well. But when these relationships are even defined and these partnerships are defined from the very beginning, it's not like the bank is just going to say, here you go. We're just going to open up the vault. You just use our name, you just use our rails and start providing debit cards to your customers or start providing, checking accounts to your customers. It's a little more complicated than that because the banks, shocker, are regulated and they're heavily regulated. So guess what? When you're partnering with them, and this is any third party that's going to partner with them, needs to understand and appreciate the bank's compliance obligations because the bank will also need to, it's almost like trickle down, right? So now the bank needs to make sure that you are able to comply with that as well. And you got to maintain safety and integrity within the entire system for these partnerships to work. And then when you have, so then when I come back to like the independent reviews, yes, that's the fintech having to understand, of course, yes, we will need to undergo independent reviews and we will need to have an AML program in place, a fraud monitoring program in place. And if they're doing like some sort of lending as a service, then the bank is going to understand and needs to understand, well, what are you doing about truth in lending and um, certain compliant disclosures across the board. So it's all
Okay.
about defining that relationship.
So, I think that's a perfect bridge and transition for us, right? So, you talked about all the things that I think these partners aren't thinking about when they're engaging into the partnership, which is why that's the value of having a lawyer, right, on your team, because you guys you eat, breathe, and sleep this, right? This is what you're thinking about. So I'd love to understand from your thought process. If I'm a bank thinking about building out a fintech program, or if I am a fintech, thinking about building a incredible product and then partnering with the bank. From a legal perspective, what do you think is the route that they should be taking to be able to do this? And what I mean by that is, okay, we want to do this. When do I engage legal, right? When should you be a part of that process? Is it at the end, right, when you've already identified that there's a bunch of problems? Is it building out the thought process and building out the solution? What's your mindset when it comes to that?
Well, it's definitely not at the end.
Okay.
So it's definitely on the other side of the spectrum. I have there's a fantastic person I've worked with throughout the years, Kevin Dodson, and he's the best product officer I know. Well, he's just incredible all around. And the one thing about working with him that was always so good is anytime he would have an idea, like, oh, I'm thinking of doing this,
Right.
he would stop and be like, you know what, Jason, I'm thinking of doing this. What are your thoughts? So my answer to your question is when you have these ideas, is always a great time to start having these conversations with somebody who knows what questions you might be getting now and down the road because you need to have that forward-looking vision. It's not, I mean, everybody's heard that saying, we're not playing checkers, we're playing chess, but we
That's,
really are at the end of the
yeah.
day. And this isn't like just move one piece at a time. It's looking at the entire board. So to answer your question, Jason, at the beginning and along the way, and around the curves and all through the ride until we get there, I often tell people, I'm usually answering three questions, right?
Okay.
Um, how do we get into this space? How do we stay into this space? And how do we grow in this space? And if I am doing my job, then I am constantly answering those three questions in relation to whatever someone is trying to do and how they may want to fix it or modify it or grow it. So it really just comes down to that.
So listen, we're baking a pie right now, right? We have the crust, and the first part of that is invite legal into the discussions early and often, right? So to add to that, here's where compliance comes in, right? Compliance now gets baked right on top of that crust, right? Now we're kind of buttering the crust a little bit, if you would. So you have these legal professionals who absolutely can assist with the framework, the strategy, and make sure that you have your T's crossed, your I's dotted, right? And then you have compliance professionals, especially a group like ours, where we have former regulators, former chief compliance officers, people who have seen the dirty part of this job, right? Even some who have made the rules within this industry, and who will come in and say, "Hey, we understand what your strategy is, right? And here's the things that you will see that maybe you haven't thought about." So now you have your compliance as a service, if you would. You have your legal team, and now you have a strategy and you have a team behind you that can go ahead and work with you as you start to build forward, right? So, the whole concept here, and I share this is right, we're the system breakers, right? But at the end of the day, what we are also is your armor. Right. So when you are looking to do something transformative, you have to be able to put your armor on. And I don't care if you're a small bank, big bank, fintech, Web3, it does not make a difference. Listen, you can open up any financial newsletter, and you'll see enforcement action after enforcement action, or you'll see a fintech that has gone bankrupt, or you'll see when crypto was really big, right? Some of these crypto exchanges kind of become defunct. And the reason for that is because they did not take care of this piece of it. And I think when you partner with really good teams, really good people, that's how you protect yourself. I mean, that's really one of the things that has tied me into the Bates Group, because I'm literally working with some of the smartest people I've ever met in the industry. And not only are they smart people in the industry, they're excited about what they do. So when they see these really transformative solutions, they don't say, hey, this is an MSB that wants to move money from America to Africa, right? They see it as, hey, this is a MSB that has something in place where they are helping people send money home to their to their sister who just had a baby at the hospital so that they can take the family home, right? We get invested into the passion behind it. And because we're invested into that passion, we're going to do everything that we can with our expertise to be able to put those guardrails up so that these incredible companies can continue to do what they do.
Yeah, no, I agree, Jason. And it's I often tell people, no matter what they're doing and how I help them, or how anyone who understands, or like even like a good compliance team would understand like how they're doing things too. I often tell people, it's like, look, half of what I do in this space, 50% of what I do in this space is legal, regulatory, and then the other 90% is strategy,
Yeah,
right? And within that strategy, you were making a good point earlier about, okay, well, there's an enforcement action here or a bankruptcy there. And I know in the world of compliance, especially, you have like KYC. Well, I'm
right.
willing to even coin, KYP
Okay.
on this meeting, because you have to know your partners as well.
Your
And
partner.
you cannot take for granted that someone else is doing running their show the right way as well. So
Well,
you have
listen,
to, no,
we're going to make sure
please.
everyone heard that, right? You said you're going to coin a phrase, KYP, know your partner. So listen, everyone who's listening today, when KYP, have these discussions, right? Know your partner. Whether you're a bank, know your partner. And banks know this, right? But fintechs, know the banks that you're partnering with as well, right? What's their history? What's their focus? How do you become a good partner for them? Because if your focus is, how do I succeed and grow as an organization without knowing who your partner is, that's a recipe for failure. And partnering with the appropriate law firm or the appropriate consulting firm on the compliance side of the house, that's how you get into that, right? Because at the end of the day, we're not stagnant as far as just working with one company. We work with everybody, right? So we have those relationships across the industry. Listen, this is fantastic. I know we only have roughly about 8 minutes left. I mean, time really does move when you're having fun. I'd like to kind of just jump into this, right? When we start to talk about what's missing in the industry, without some of the things that we've already covered on the call, what are some of the things that you feel are missing from a fintech bank partnership, right? How do you frame that from the beginning in a way where everybody is on the same page? Or is there any kind of guidance that you could offer on this call that helps people think about it in a different way?
Well, I don't know if it's as much missing as much as there's just so much of just not knowing what you don't know,
Yeah,
and then just trying, your best to figure it out. Because, I'll revisit, Jason, where it's like these are incredibly smart people, with whether you're having these ideas that you want to do this, like, oh, you know what, we can really meet our customer demand even better if we were to try to do this. Or you have someone behind the scenes building a product or a program saying, you know what, I'm looking at the world around me and it could really use this. Or
yeah,
you have some really smart financial people who are like, oh, you know what, if we were able to do this and then scale it and then get some investment here, then we can really do that. So whether it's any of those, at the bottom of it is, I don't know if it's a lacking as much as, lacking fundamentally, in the sense is just not knowing what you don't know. And that's where, when you have these ideas, um, you seek the right help. And hopefully you can kind of grow them that way, if
Yeah.
that makes sense. It's like,
Oh,
you
no,
got to
no.
just bring it together.
It makes sense. I've been a consultant for quite some time now. And one of the things that, I really have always focused on is, when you call me, the expertise that I'm going to be able to add to your organization is how do you get from point A to point B, right? And what
Mhm.
I've learned along the way, and anybody who knows me in this industry, I've always said this, and I think I say it on every live, every call, it does not make a difference. There are three fundamental keys to being successful in this industry. One, you have to solve a problem. So you have to have that transformational idea that solves a problem, right? Two, you're going to require a little bit of money because it is not cheap to play in this game, right? But thirdly, and this is the most important piece of it, is you have to have a rock solid compliance foundation because everything crumples when it's not there. I've seen business after business fail to be able to take off on a runway, regardless of how much money they've raised, regardless of how much time and investment they've made in people, because they didn't think about compliance first. So when I come into these discussions, the first thing I want to do is say, hey, how do we address your compliance needs? And this is on the bank side of the house as well, right? How do we address those compliance needs? How do we holistically look at what you're trying to do? And then who do we need to bring in to make sure that we are as rock solid as we need to? Because that investment that is just as big on the compliance side as it is on your go-to-market strategy. Matter of fact, it is embedded into that go-to-market strategy. So, those are my thoughts on it. As we have a few minutes left, what I'd love to do is give you an opportunity to tell the audience how they can reach you and, where in their journey they may be, how they should be thinking about Jason Noto.
Well, you can think about me as just somebody who understands payments and fintech. I have, old school roots, kind of like Mo Green said
Okay.
in Godfather, right? Where he says to Michael, hey, I was making my bones while you were like dating cheerleaders. Like everything has moved so fast and you have these new views, but at the end of the day, it's like you have to have that fundamental payments vision. And whether it's cryptocurrency, which is just becoming huge. And here at Polsinelli, we have our Chambers rated practice led by Steven Rutenberg, Dan McAvoy,
Yeah.
um, Romaine Marshall. We work as a team in the crypto space, and um, you got to know your partner, most importantly. So, like, I can't let another second go by in this call without saying, you down with KYP? Yeah, you know me.
Oh,
So
man.
like you got it, like you got to go with that, right, Jason? So
Yeah.
anyway, you can reach me by email. I'm on LinkedIn, and I'm always happy. Like I say, I'm always happy to talk payments, policy, and punk rock, because it's such an exciting space, and people are trying to accomplish so many things here, and just try to make your dreams come true.
Fantastic, fantastic. And I kind of do the same, right? For the audience, listen, I'm an entrepreneur when it comes to, my thought process, right? I'm a builder myself, right? So if you have this incredible idea, if you're trying to do something transformative, when you think about the Bates Group and my team, don't think about, your traditional compliance consulting, being able to give you just policies and procedures. Yes, we could do all those different things. But what's really special about my team and about my group is that we are builders. So when it comes to having a really good idea, not only will our insight help you get where you want to go, we're going to help put those guardrails in place, right? So whether it's a gap analysis, a model validation, a look back for a bank, listen, I could reel off all the different services that we offer. Fractional chief compliance officer support, right? We're the right team for you, and we'd love to have a discussion with you. So I want to thank everybody for taking a moment to join the live, and I hope you took away some good value from this discussion. And please reach out to the Jasons if you need us.
See ya. Thanks for everything, Jay.
All right, take care.
Bye.
Bye.